I'm leaving academia. After conducting research for almost a decade, I'm closing this door on my future that I've pretty much worked my entire life towards. Hey, I'm Mohan Gupta, and I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at University of California, San Diego, in the Experimental Psychology Department. And I research what are the best ways to learn, why are those the best ways, and can I build mathematical models to predict what people will learn in both declarative learning, like, learning that the powerhouse of the cell is the mitochondria, or motor learning, like how to learn the piano. I'm still going to finish my PhD because essentially if I stop work now, I could graduate. Even still, this was a really hard decision for me to make. I've kind of had a foot out the door of academia for a while, and even though I've been leaning away from academia for quite a bit of time, it's still difficult to really consciously close that door in your mind for something that you've been working towards for a decade. I didn't think that making the conscious decision to leave academia would have such an emotional effect on me because I already had a foot out the door. But really, it felt like my life's purpose or my life's mission had been removed, and I kind of felt lost, emotionally depressed for quite a while, even though I was working out, hanging out with friends, doing all the things you're supposed to do to keep a healthy lifestyle. I really felt like something was really missing from my life when I made this decision. And even though I had made a conscious choice to switch into something else, which is making a startup, a platform for people to learn the piano, which I'll touch on later, I was still, pretty down with regards to this fact, and it really has taken me quite a while to kind of emotionally recover from this. I think this is why I feel compelled to make a video like this, because I feel like I need to kind of get a lot of these feelings and thoughts off of my chest, and hopefully someone else will be able to relate to this. But really, this is just going to be a stream of consciousness for me, and then maybe it'll hopefully benefit someone else as well. I'm hoping, maybe someone else feels like they're in this position and that they feel compelled to leave academia for whatever reason. My reasons aren't because, I don't like my research or I don't like my advisor or my department. I actually love all those things I'm doing. I really enjoy my research. I love my advisor. My department's great. But yeah, I'm still leaving academia. And if you're watching this video and you relate to these thoughts, leave a comment. Hopefully we can spark some kind of discussion about why people are leaving academia and what your reasons might be. Or if you're thinking about getting into academia, at least this might hopefully will, give you some insight about what kind of trajectories people go on. Let's start from the beginning of my academic journey. I went to school at Michigan State University where I double majored in psychology and neuroscience. And I go even further back to give you more context about why I even ended up majoring in neuroscience and psychology. In middle school, I read this book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by the late Oliver Sacks. And he was a really magnificent writer, and he was very good at communicating the fantastical computations that our brain does that really kind of was quite poetic. This began to open my eyes about things that our brain does automatically that we take for granted, like facial recognition, for example. Why doesn't our brain always mistake someone's face for a hat that they might wear? And then it further illuminated that, when things go wrong in the brain, some really weird things can happen, like mistaking your wife for a hat, for example. This whole book really produced a childlike wonderment in terms of like this nebulous space that is our brain in the most complex machine known to humankind. And ultimately, this set me out on this career path of pursuing psychology. Anyways, when I entered university, I did the typical thing that all South Asian kids do is, you're also pre-med, that's a requirement. And so I was kind of on this dual track of doing, and being interested in psychology and neuroscience, but also doing all those classes that pre-med students would do as well. And then in my second semester of university, I joined a research lab investigating the neural substrates of natural reading. And this is where I got my chance to have my first hands-on experience with research of some kind. And then the year after, I joined a visual attention lab where I would eventually conduct my senior thesis on motor learning. And then I also joined another lab, or actually it was an independent research project with a group of neuroscience kids. That was a case study investigating visual agnosia. This was a really interesting case where the person had 2D visual agnosia, so they couldn't see 2D objects, and so that made studying organic chemistry very hard, even though they were actually much smarter than I was. So by the end of my second year in university, I was in essentially 3 different labs spending a lot of time doing research. And then I was graciously accepted in this program called Euroscholars, where I got to do a semester of research in Geneva, Switzerland. This, of course, cost a lot of money. So the summer before that, I went that semester in Switzerland. I worked like 50, 60-hour weeks just to make sure I had enough money, got some scholarships, just so I could afford to live there, and then also do some traveling as well. And so the original program was actually signed up for sleep and neuroimaging, but then I ended up just doing motor learning research, which I still continue to this day. I was doing this motor learning research, and my advisor in Switzerland, she had the idea that, there's this phenomenon called consolidation occurring during short breaks while you're learning a motor sequence task. And according to the literature that I read, I kind of strongly disagreed with this statement because, I thought there was strong evidence against it. And there were several things I could have handled about the situation better, because I wasn't doing the research I was told I was going to be doing. I thought I was correct according to the literature. I was able to amend the study, but I still thought I was quite right. And there was a lot of things I could have handled better and that I could handle better now because I'm, almost a decade older. But I thought, it wasn't that quality of science that they were conducting, and I still think that today. But I could have been a lot more tactful in how I communicated my thoughts, which, was a learning lesson for me. And because of this, I didn't really enjoy the program. I didn't feel supported by Euroscholars itself necessarily, and they didn't really seem to do too much for me. Other than that, I was able to do research here in Switzerland. And so because I didn't really like this program, essentially I just spent a lot of time traveling to different countries. It's because I just want to make the most of it, because it's like $50 for a flight to go anywhere from Geneva, which was great. And so then I get back from Switzerland, keep on continuing the research that I've been doing, and I'm a very stubborn person, if you can't tell. Extremely stubborn. So I continue actually the motor learning research that I was doing in Geneva, and I created a new experiment to test my hypotheses to show, to help disprove this consolidation hypothesis and prove this other idea that I thought was right. And so that's what I did my senior thesis on. And even still to this day, I'm actually continuing this line of research on motor learning, which is related to piano learning as well. And you can read my most recent publication in Nature Partner Journal's Science of Learning on this topic, and I also just published a preprint that will be hopefully published soon in a pretty good journal. I think this newest paper is even better than my last paper. But yeah, to summarize my undergraduate career, I had done a lot of research, I worked really hard, and how many publications did I get? Fat zero, even though I had worked extremely hard, much harder than most people I know. Some of it was due to bad luck. Results don't always turn out how you expect them to turn out. But some of it was due to people in power positions over me, where I actually wrote, I think, a paper or two, an entire paper or two. I said, here's a paper, can you please review this? And they just never did. So already, by the time I had left my undergraduate institution, I've had several bad experiences in academia. But nonetheless, I was so infatuated with the idea of research and conducting research, I continued on this career path. And so when I graduated, I had a job at University of California in Los Angeles doing research on psychotic adolescents. And so I had skills in neuroimaging, behavioral analyses, and also worked with the clinical population. So really I was almost a perfect fit for this job. And I decided to take these 2 years in between my undergrad and my PhD because I wanted a stronger application. And if I had a stronger application, I thought I could go to a better school. And, also because I worked extremely hard, I was participating in a lot of organizations in undergrad. I had 2 degrees that I had to finish. I was doing a lot of research. I was pretty burnt out, and I kind of just wanted a break as well. And aside from that, I wanted to do some personal development of skills. So I spent a lot of time developing my coding ability with R, how to analyze neuroimaging data sets, and also statistics. I was teaching myself a lot of statistics. If you look on this channel, you can also learn how to do some machine learning for neuroimagers, but you can also apply these machine learning skills to basically anything. I was also really infatuated with neuroimaging. I thought, measuring stuff from the brain was super cool. And, having, you're directly measuring neural activity. Well, not with functional MRI, you're not measuring neural activity, you're just measuring blood flow, but you're doing something pretty adjacent. Oh, sorry. And, I got so infatuated with neuroimaging, I printed my own brain. I have my own brain tattooed on me, really super into neuroimaging. But then I figured out that, for the questions I got interested in, which is higher level cognition, Neuroimaging isn't really the best tool to answer those questions, in my opinion, and I think a lot of scientists would agree with me. I also wasn't interested in clinical data because I realized it's a pain in the ass to gather that data. And this is kind of one of the factors of why I'm doing cognitive psychology research is because it's relatively easy to collect the data. Right now, I just have people do web experiments and I don't have to monitor them. They just go up. And if there's an issue with it, someone will email me, but it's just automatic data collection that really makes things much faster to conduct research. And I decided to go to UC San Diego for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was the best fit for me for my advisor because he'd actually done this motor learning research that I was pretty fond of, at least his ideas about how it worked. And then also, when I interviewed, it seemed like the students were happier here than other universities. That was just my perception, and I think it's still pretty true. Like, obviously, doing your PhD is a very hard thing, and you're not always happy during the whole thing. But it seemed on average, at least this interaction with the interview weekend, people seemed to be happy on average. And to touch on why I'm pursuing the research that I'm pursuing now, over those 2 years as a research assistant at UCLA, I really began to realize I cared a lot about equity in education. I wouldn't be here where I am currently if I didn't end up going to a much better school than I had initially gone to in K through 12. And that was only possible because I won a lottery to go to a better school, which, when you think about it, is really messed up. That's how our education system works, at least in America. And because I was afforded those opportunities, I was able to capitalize on them, but not everyone's even given the chance to do that. And so I had this idea that I could improve equity through improving how people learn. I can't change people's material circumstances. I can't change necessarily the opportunities they have on a large scale, at least. But I can change at least how we know the best ways are to learn. That's something you can dispense to everybody. So that's why I study and research what I do today is what are the best ways to learn? Why are those the best ways? And, can I build mathematical models to predict what people will learn? And the idea is that we could build a curriculum around these ideas about what are the best ways to learn to increase equity and decrease inequalities in education. I felt like this was the right narrative for me to enter graduate school, and I was passionate about the ideas of improving cognition. In the fall of 2019, I finally actually made it to UC San Diego to start my PhD, and I hit the ground running, pursuing 2 research projects. Because I had so much research experience, I was really able to use that to help me kind of pursue what I wanted, both of which are now published. You can find on my Google Scholar, linked in the description. But yeah, I was laser focused when I got into my program, where I would just do research. I was reading as much as possible, and then at night I would just work out and sleep, eat, repeat. On top of this, I was experiencing some family issues. My dad was in relatively poor health at the time, and he ended up passing in that November of 2019. Yeah, I remember I'd gotten back from a friend's wedding in Texas, and my brother sent me a text message like the next day in the morning, and basically that whole day I just spent crying, just crying. So I canceled all my meetings, told my professors I was just gonna be out. My dad had just passed. I booked a flight back to Michigan, to Barron, Michigan in November, and it really kind of felt like a reflection of my inside feelings at the time, ironically. Just a cold void where there's just emptiness. To say the least, this was a really difficult time for me, and even now it's still kind of hard to talk about. And I wondered at the time if I should take a quarter off or not to process all these emotions, and hopefully it wouldn't affect my work. But I realized the best way to honor my dad was, just to keep on doing the work, because he was an immigrant in this country, and I think that's what he would have wanted for me to do, is to succeed as much as possible. But also there was the financial issue, because in graduate school, you're not rich. I couldn't financially afford to take the time off either. So, my money is tied to my work, so if I took time off, I wouldn't be able to get paid. And I'm also an extremely stubborn person, and there's some grants due. Oh, there's my laundry alarm. And I'm an extremely stubborn person, and there were some grants due the next week, I think. So I just decided, screw it, let's just try and get this in. But, I didn't actually get those grants, but it was good to try. Yeah, so my siblings and I, we did a quick memorial service in Michigan, because my sister was also in med school at the time, and we didn't want to spend too long on this. So we did the memorial service, and then we burned the body, and then we flew back. It was really strange losing a parental figure because this person who's been present in your life, you know, up until that point for 24 years, it was really strange, knowing that even though I didn't talk to my dad on a day-to-day basis, that if I called him, there'd be no one on the other phone besides this, remembrance of his voicemail. And now the only memories that exist of him are, the pictures I've digitized and what we keep in our mind. My dad was a yogi, and I didn't realize how much of a central figure he was in mid-Michigan for that community. It was really touching to hear at the memorial service of all the yogis there, people who practice with him, and how much of an impact he had on their lives. Anyways, to say the least, this time was really difficult for me. But I still persisted in grad school because I kind of didn't see any other options, and I also, kind of just wanted to block out all these emotions and just singularly focus on the work I was doing. I did the things you're supposed to do, is like see a therapist, work out, all those things. But I don't know if you remember, in 2020, this is about like 5 months after my dad had died, COVID happened. And so the whole world went on lockdown. I'm not gonna go too much into this time, to say the least, because I think we're all, we've beaten this dead horse of what we did during lockdown. But I was in a very fortunate position to continue my research because I had just learned how to code web experiments. So I knew JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and so I could run all of my experiments online. And I still do this to this day because it makes data collection much faster. I think I talked about this earlier, but it makes your life significantly easier because you don't have to worry about research assistants running your experiment or not running them correctly or not even showing up. And you just get data, and it really speeds up your pipeline to creating publications, because that's kind of what matters in grad school. If you're trying to go to an R1 academic institution, you want a lot of publications and grant money. Over the next few years, I continued to trudge on with my research, and I started to think about the life I wanted to live after I graduated. For me, my ideal life would be in Southern California. I would have the freedom to pursue what I wanted in work, and I would obviously have enough money to live comfortably because Southern California is pretty expensive. I kind of began to reconcile that academia didn't really fit this bill. I'd have to be a postdoc for 2 years after I graduated, making around $50,000. That position would probably not be in Southern California. And then even after that, I would, if I was lucky, I would get a job as a professor. Probably not in Southern California either. I'd probably just take, the best position I could get, which would be, wherever. You're just happy as a postdoc to get a professorship, honestly. And then maybe after being at that university for 5 or so years, then maybe I could be able to get a professorship at a Southern California university on the coastline. But even that's not a guarantee. For context, everyone we interview at UCSD in the psychology department for faculty positions, they all have these Ivy League pedigrees with crazy publications and the best journals. And so they're very competitive applicants. And this thought process caused me to remember when I was at UCLA, working for my boss, Katie, who's a phenomenal boss. Shout out to Katie, amazing person. I remember I was in the room when she got the call for her tenureship. She got, her tenure accepted. Her application was accepted to be a full tenured professor at UCLA, and she started crying tears of joy. And at the time, I don't think I really understood why she was crying those tears of joy. I really didn't understand what that moment meant to her. Looking back with the knowledge I have now, I understand that she had worked really hard to get to that position. She's from San Diego, and she had spent like 5 or so years in New York. And before that, she was a research assistant / postdoc at UCLA. And she had a long career of just trying to get back to this position, and to just obtain this job security was a huge milestone for her. And, she probably sacrificed a lot along the way just to have this kind of security. And this is someone who's incredibly smart and talented and has done like a lot of good for the world as well. I remember one time I was like doing some training to get certified on a 7T scanner to be able to scan animals, and the guy was like, "Oh, you work for Katie, you must be really smart." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." But it was like more of a reflection of how smart Katie was. Anyways, let's fast forward to the fall of 2022, just last year. If you didn't hear, all the UC grad students and postdocs went on strike, which was the largest strike in the US last year and the largest education strike in US history. I can't state how historic this moment was, and it also lasted for, I don't know, like 6 to 7 weeks. It was a long time for this community to be on strike. I'm not going to say whether I was on strike or not, just because of legal reasons, just to kind of, if that doesn't indicate how shitty the UC system is. And really during this time, UC didn't make strong offers until week 5 or 6, I think, of the strike. They didn't put anything serious on the table. They didn't try to, meet us in the middle anywhere. Obviously, our demands were quite high because we just want to be able to live in California, not in poverty, was really the bare minimum. And eventually we did get a better deal. I'm not saying it's the best deal or is even adequate, that's up to your personal opinion. It is significantly better than what we were being paid for a lot of students. However, it made me realize that the administrators in university systems kind of just really don't care about the backbone of their university who produces their research, which is graduate students and postdocs. Obviously, faculty are very important as well, but the people who are doing the work, doing the analyses, collecting the data, doing most of the writing are the grad students and the postdocs. And it was really hurtful to see that the administrators just kind of didn't really care, cared that we could live above the poverty line. And UC as a system, or the administrators, employed a lot of union-busting tactics. They did some illegal things, for sure. Even Fox News at one point said, they're like, what they did is kind of illegal, and how they're trying to take back pay. And when Fox News is saying you're doing something sketchy or illegal towards labor practices, that's how you know it's pretty bad. And I don't think the UC school system is unique in how poorly they treat their graduate student workers in this. I think it's kind of a reflection of all universities, actually, in that there's these administrators who are very disconnected from the work, and I just didn't feel respected or treated well, even though I'm a good graduate student. By all metrics, I produce a lot of research. I'm good at what I do, relatively. Not the best, but I'm good. And I just, in general, just felt extremely disrespected by this. Just to clarify for anyone who doesn't know how graduate students are typically paid, in a lot of cases is we're paid through us being TAs, and a lot of times we aren't necessarily paid for our research in all cases. Sometimes you are as a graduate student researcher if your advisor has grant money, but a lot of advisors don't have grant money. Like mine does not have grant money, so I can only be funded through my work as a TA and not my actual, work that matters for my career, which is doing research. That is an apprenticeship, but we aren't paid for our apprenticeship work. So the incentive structures are kind of back-ass words in academia for graduate students, at least in terms for pay. And all this is to really say is that it cemented this idea in my head that the university system just kind of doesn't really care too much about you as a graduate student or as an academic worker. You're just there to make them look good and, increase their value in their institutional rankings. This is obviously a very cynical view that I hold now. Not everyone's going to hold this view, and it's just my personal opinion, but it is personally how I feel. I think this is the sentiment of a lot of different graduate students as well. And I kind of find it pretty sad that this is how the system's become. So I think it's going to push a lot of grad students out who are, good at what they do, who are good scientists, but they're going to realize is that if they're not going to be compensated fairly for their work, and we work really hard, then we're just going to leave and go on to better things. And I think this is, not good for academia, because graduate students are realizing they're not going to be compensated for their work, and the job outlooks for academics to become a professor are not good. And if you're going to work this hard just for a passion that you hold near and dear to your heart like I do, but then you have to come to grips with, if you're not compensated for the work you do, and you're continually burned out and not rewarded, and the rewards that you actually get in academia, like getting that publication, are so delayed, then what are you actually working for? What do you get in return for that? And obviously I'm highlighting a lot of negatives here. There are a lot of positives to being a graduate student. For me personally, it's the, flexible schedule. I'm still working 50, 60-hour weeks, but I have a flexible schedule. I get to pursue my own ideas and research. A lot of independence is going on. I get to work on the cutting edge of human knowledge. I get to talk to other really smart people, hear really other interesting ideas. All these things are amazing. The system for me, the environment, the general environment for me, not in my department, but it just really starts to weigh, has really started to weigh on me. And that's why I'm leaving. At the same time, I didn't spend these 5 years to just go work for a company as a data scientist or like as some UX researcher. No shade at like anyone who's done that, but that's not what I spent this time to do, to become. Like that was not my goal, and that's not a lot of other people's goals, but it's the reality of like what they want to do because they want to earn some money. They want to earn at least a little bit of money and not have to worry about their work 24/7. I totally understand people who go into it. I've thought very deeply about going into those career paths as well. Talk to people who are in them, apply to those internships. And I totally understand anyone who goes into that career path, but this isn't what people spend 5 years to do. Again, this is a really cynical take, but it is the reality that grad students are facing currently. And so I don't think it's a misrepresentation. But I don't want to go into industry and work for someone. I really, really, really like the freedom that academia provides in some aspects. It's not always as free as it's made out to be, because if you have a grant, you have to do the stuff that you said you're going to do in the grant. But I do enjoy being able to pursue ideas that I want to pursue. And this is why I started a startup, to teach people the piano. I'm in a very fortunate position where if I essentially stopped doing my research now, I could still graduate. I just have to write like a little bit more, but then I'd be good. And so I figured, let's send a Hail Mary and see if I can create a successful startup in 1 year. I do sequence learning research, which is essentially how to play a piano. And I can take these skills and ideas and my domain knowledge and see if I can apply it to a startup and provide value to users, for people who are trying to learn the piano. And this fulfills a lot of life requirements for me and how I want to live life. I can live where I want. It has the potential to provide stable income. And it's exciting, and it really, challenges me as a person in developing a lot of new skills. I had to learn a new programming language for this, a new engine. I don't know anything about marketing, so I'm learning stuff about that. I don't know anything about business, so I'm learning about that. And so it's kind of scratching this itch that I haven't been able to scratch recently. This is kind of an aside, but I've kind of hit this flywheel with my research where I finish a paper and I finish an idea, and it kind of produces new questions that I can pursue again and keep doing. And so it's been very, not necessarily easy, but I've definitely really felt like I've hit my stride with it. And so I necessarily haven't felt very challenged recently in doing it. I'm still learning new things, but nothing's been like, oh wow, this feels insurmountable. Whereas with this business, a lot of it feels kind of nebulous, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. And so I want to try it. And if you're interested in learning the piano, check it out, midiscale.com, links in the description. I'd really appreciate it if you do. And if you found any of this helpful, I'd appreciate if you leave a like or comment some of your thoughts and feelings if you're a graduate student, about if you're leaving academia, if you're staying in it, if any of this resonates with you. I'd really like to start a conversation or just talk to people. And if you have any suggestions on this video, if you want to talk about anything I've gone through or done in graduate school, happy to talk about it. If you have any feedback for me on how to make this better, I've never done anything like this before, so new experience for me as well. Yeah, see ya.